In a small, humble village, cloaked under the relentless sun, a young mother's day began with a quiet but fierce determination. The air was thick, almost suffocating with heat, wrapping the earth and every living thing in a warm, still blanket like an oven. The morning lacked any hint of rest or simplicity. Instead, it brought with it the unyielding weight of survival, a burden carried not by one generation, but shared between mother and child, bound together by blood, struggle, and the thin thread of hope. As early dawn stretched its pale fingers across the land, the young mother and her small child prepared themselves to face yet another day in their modest existence. Their reality was harsh, painted in shades of brown earth and blistering sunlight, yet within it lay stories of strength that often went unnoticed. This morning was like many before it, yet no less critical. Their livelihood depended on the harvest of peanuts, modest in value but vital to their continued existence. The woman's hands, worn from labor, gathered the sturdy, rough pods from the earth. Her body moved with a practiced rhythm born out of necessity. The child, young and light, walked beside her or occasionally sat in the shade, playing quietly while his mother worked. The peanuts, when collected and bagged, were more than just seeds. They represented their chance to earn the money that would keep their fragile life afloat, to stave off hunger, and to settle old debts. Although the sun was cruel and unrelenting, its heat was only a small part of the worries that weighed heavily on their hearts. Their land was not truly their own. They lived and worked under the watchful eyes of a landowner whose daughter was expected to come soon. With the daughter's arrival looming, so too grew the pressure and urgency of the unpaid debts. A week had already passed since the last payment was due, yet the money had not been found. The debt was a dark cloud lingering over their daily struggles, a storm that threatened to sweep them away at any moment. Each peanut harvested was a small battle won against the tide of poverty, but the reality was that without the means to pay, their home could be taken from them. The young mother, despite the hard life, carried within her a deep love and fierce instinct to protect her child, Tony. His innocence contrasted sharply with the harshness in which they lived. His presence was a small light that made the unbearable days just a little more bearable. She often wished she could shield him from the world's cruelty. With every peanut bag filled, she hoped there would be enough to buy time, to keep the shadow of eviction at bay for just a little longer. Their day unfolded in the familiar pattern of labor and small hopes. The child, too young to understand their precarious position fully, would sit and play under the shade, sometimes peering curiously at the work his mother did. Moments of rest were cherished amidst the constant drive to gather more crops to earn more money. The fields, dusty and expansive, bore witness to their toil and their determination. Around them, the world was not silent. Everyday interactions brought reminders of their difficult situation. The mother would speak briefly with neighbors and sellers, trading small words about debts and payments. Each conversation was tinged with urgency, worry, or sometimes frustration. A creditor would sometimes come to ask plainly if the money was ready. The mother's answers were often filled with apologies, explanations of hardship, and requests for more time. "I don't have it yet," she would say quietly. "I'm trying, but it's hard." The creditors, however, were less patient. Weeks prior, the landlord's daughter had given them a deadline, a week to repay the money owed. That time passed without payment. The consequence was clear. If the debt was not settled soon, they would have to leave the land, giving up the only home they knew. The threat hung over them like a sword. Eviction was not a distant possibility, but a very likely, painful reality. The mother pleaded for understanding, for a sliver of grace. "Please give me more time," she would say whenever asked. "I will earn the money, just a little more time." But each plea was met with a hard refusal. The landlord's daughter was firm and unyielding, insisting that if payment was not made in full, the mother and child should leave. There was no mercy shown for the old debts or the hardships that made payment impossible. The pressure did not ease, it only grew more acute with every passing day. Despite these obstacles, the mother never stopped trying. Every sunrise saw her in the fields, gathering her peanut harvest, hoping that her hard work would soon translate into enough money to end their nightmare. Yet the sum earned was always too small, and the debt relentlessly continued to loom. Her spirit was tested each day by the demands of creditors and her desperate need to provide for her child. In the midst of this hardship, there were moments of quiet kindness. A neighbor watched closely, quietly offering help too subtle to refuse outright. This neighbor would sometimes inquire how the mother and child were managing. When the landlord's daughter came to collect money recently, the small amount earned was taken away. The mother felt the weight of loss deeply, but she also carried a fragile hope from the promise that the landlord's daughter would return in 2 days. These 2 days became a beacon of uneasy anticipation. During this time, the mother prepared herself, the child, and their home as best as she could. Even small tasks carried meaning, such as taking care of Tony's long hair, which in the heat became uncomfortable. A neighbor kindly offered to cut the boy's hair, a small but meaningful gesture of care that eased one of their many burdens. Simple acts of kindness like these provided brief relief and a sense that even in tough times, support could be found in community. The story of this mother and child is one of endurance against the tides of hardship and uncertainty. It is not just about unpaid debts or eviction. It is a testament to the strength found in love and determination. The mother's ongoing fight is a narrative of hope, resilience, and sacrifice, lived out in daily acts of courage and the fervent wish to protect her child from the cruelties of their world. Even though the horizon held many threats, she faced each day with a steady heart, knowing that the future remained unwritten and that her efforts today might secure a better tomorrow, not only for herself, but especially for Tony. Their journey was far from over, but in the quiet resilience of a mother and the innocent hope of a child, a powerful story of survival unfolded beneath the blazing sun. The heavy air of uncertainty hung thickly over the small family's dwelling like a suffocating blanket. Each day dawned with the same grim realization. The debt that loomed over their heads was not a distant threat, but an ever-approaching storm whose dark clouds promised no mercy. The little house, precariously perched on the edge of entitlement and eviction, stood as a stark reminder of fragility in the face of relentless hardship. Every creak of the wooden floorboards and every whisper of the wind through the cracked windows carried with them the anxious heartbeat of a mother fighting to keep her child safe. Though the sun scorched the village with brutal intensity, it was the emotional heat, the persistent pressure of debts and dwindling hope that really bore down on her soul. In the silence of pre-dawn, before labor would begin, her mind was a world with reflections on the past and fears for the future. She remembered times when life was simpler, or so she thought, and she grappled with the weight of the choices that had brought her here, to this fragile edge. The burdens of responsibility pressed down, but so did the fierce love she bore for Tony, whose innocent laughter was a balm in this harsh world. Mornings began early and ended late in the relentless pursuit of survival. The routine was etched into her bones, repetitive yet always desperate. She would rise before the roosters crowed, gathering what strength sleep had reluctantly granted, preparing for the long hours ahead. The fields where the peanuts grew were both sanctuary and prison. Sanctuary because they offered a chance at earning something. Prison because they symbolized the endless toil that brought little relief. She worked with hands calloused and cracked, her back bent beneath the sun, gathering peanuts with a weary precision born from necessity. Her son Tony, still very young, often did not fully grasp the gravity of their situation. His days were punctuated by small moments of joy, playing among the dusty rows, searching for bugs, or simply sitting in his mother's lap when she could spare the time. Yet even in his youthful innocence, there were signs of understanding. He would sometimes look up quizzically at her, as if sensing the cloud of worry that never quite left her face. The bittersweet love between them filled their days with both tenderness and urgency. a yearning for a life beyond the harshness surrounding them. The village itself was a modest sprawl, marked by the weathered faces of many who knew similar stories. Neighbors often exchanged brief words when paths crossed, words heavy with concern or veiled sympathy. The mother could see in their eyes recognition of her plight, an unspoken camaraderie born of shared hardship. Yet, though community simmered with bonds of mutual aid, there was also the harsh reality of survival that made compassion often feel like a luxury few could afford. Among those neighbors was a particularly watchful figure who had shown small gestures of kindness. This person would check in quietly, offering a helping hand without fanfare, a reminder that even in hardship, threads of humanity persisted. It was these small moments that offered fragile hope, reminders that she was not entirely alone in facing the storm. But looming largest in her mind was the figure of the landlord's daughter. Her presence was a grim specter in the fabric of their lives. The demands she made came swiftly and without softness, a constant ticking clock toward eviction. She came to collect payment repeatedly, taking whatever little the mother managed to earn without hesitation or mercy. The knowledge that the land was not really theirs hung over the family like a shadow that threatened to engulf their entire world. The pressure crystallized most with the deadlines, first a week, then only days, to pay what was owed or leave immediately. The mother pleaded desperately each time, reasoned and begged for more time, only to be met with cold refusals and threats. It was as if her hopes and hard work were invisible to those who held the power. The only language that mattered was money, an unattainable goal that seemed to slip further away even as her hands worked tirelessly. As the days grew shorter and the deadline nearer, the mother's thoughts turned inward, fraught with struggle. She wrestled with fear and determination, the cornerstones of her existence. Sleep was elusive, filled with dreams of losing everything and waking to an empty space where once lay her home. Yet within the fear bloomed an unyielding resolve. The mother knew that succumbing to despair would only hasten ruin. She steadied herself by picturing Tony's future, imagining brighter days just beyond the horizon of their current suffering. Her mind also drifted to the meaning of the land itself. It was not just soil beneath their feet. It was a symbol of stability, of home, of a life she fought for every day. Losing it would be losing more than just a piece of earth. It would be losing a part of her and her child's identity. The peanuts they harvested each day represented more than food or money. They were a thread woven into their survival, a fragile lifeline that kept hardship at bay. The emotional toll was accompanied by profound exhaustion. The physical labor was unforgiving, and though her body ached, it was the weariness in her heart that was hardest to bear. She often found herself staring out over the fields in the quiet moments, her thoughts spinning stories of resilience, survival, and hope. The contrast between the scorching sun and the cool shade, between the hard earth and the tender skin of her child, underscored the contradictions ingrained in their life, the harsh and the gentle existing side by side. Throughout her days, the mother found comfort in simple routines, the familiar feel of soil in her hands, the rhythms of planting and harvesting, the quiet ticking of the world around them. Even the small act of Tony's hair needing to be cut became infused with meaning. When a neighbor offered to help by cutting his long, hot hair, it was a rare instance of care and relief in an otherwise unforgiving existence. This gesture was a tangible symbol of community, a reminder that kindness, even small and fleeting, could bring moments of light to their lives. Yet the threat of eviction cast an ever-darkening shadow. The promise the landowner's daughter made to return in 2 days fueled both hope and dread. The mother prepared herself for the confrontation, imagining the possible outcomes, pleading for mercy, fighting to delay the inevitable, or facing the painful reality of losing their home. The uncertainty was a dark cloud that hovered at the edges of every waking thought, creating a tension that pulled at the threads of her resolve. In the quiet moments, the mother also reflected on the nature of power and poverty. The inequity of their world was palpable. The landlord's daughter, wielding money and ownership as weapons, held their fate in her hands. The mother's power lay only in her labor, her resilience, and her love. She acknowledged this imbalance without bitterness, only a cold, clear understanding that life was often unfair and that survival depended on courage and perseverance. As the countdown to the landlord's daughter's return continued, the mother found herself revisiting memories of better times. The laughter of community gatherings, the taste of fresh peanuts roasted over an open fire, the gentle touch of a father long gone. These memories acted as fragile anchors, grounding her amidst the storm of present challenges. They reminded her of what was at stake and why the fight was worth every ounce of strength she could muster. In the face of this overwhelming hardship, the mother found a strange strength and hope. It was not the loud, triumphant kind, but a quiet, persistent ember that refused to be extinguished no matter how fierce the winds blew. It lived in the daily rituals of work, in the protection of her child, and in the belief that the future might yet hold grace and possibility. The relationship between mother and child deepened in these harsh circumstances. Tony's innocence and growing awareness of their struggles created a layer of complexity in their bond. The mother often spoke to him softly, not just to comfort, but to prepare him for a world far less kind than his bright young eyes imagined. She hoped her love and guidance would shield him as much as possible from pain and loss. Their story, marked by daily struggles, intermittent kindness, and the unrelenting presence of threat, stood as a testament to human endurance. It was a story not just of debt and survival, but of the profound resilience found in love. The land they inhabited, the peanuts they harvested, and the small community around them all wove into a tapestry of a life being fought for every day. Though the horizon was filled with uncertainty, the mother faced each new day with a steady spirit. She embraced the unbearable realities with the quiet dignity of someone who knows that giving up is not an option. Her journey was far from over. Each moment a thread in a larger tapestry of survival, hope, and undying love for her child. The final confrontation awaited, but until that moment arrived, she lived in determination, in hope, and in the simple, profound act of holding on. The days crawled forward with an agonizing slowness. The promise of the landowner's daughter's return loomed closer, each tick of the clock a harsh reminder that time was running perilously short. The mother's mind was a whirlpool of thoughts and emotions, swirling constantly without rest. The weight of impending confrontation pressed heavily on her shoulders, yet beneath the strain there lay a resolve, a fierce determination to stand firm for the sake of her child. Her body, though worn thin from ceaseless toil, held on to that fragile thread of strength woven from love and necessity. The land they clung to was more than just earth. It was the heart of their life and the symbol of all they hoped to preserve. Her days were marked by continuous labor. The relentless sun beat harshly upon her back as she scoured the fields for every last peanut that might be harvested and sold. Each seed was a speck of hope, a possible means to pay off the mounting debts and stave off eviction. The burden was more than just financial, it was emotional and physical. Muscles ached, skin grew cracked from constant exposure, and yet she pressed forward, driven by a deep, unspoken promise to her child. Tony's innocence clung stubbornly to him, unshaken by the weight of the crisis, yet quietly influenced by the atmosphere around him. Sometimes he would ask simple questions, curious about the hurried footsteps of neighbors, the worried glances of adults, or the stacks of peanut bags piled high beside them. In response, the mother offered soft reassurances, her voice a gentle shield against the encroaching harshness of their reality. She tried to preserve his childhood from the shadows of debt and loss that surrounded them. At night, when the world was silent except for the creak of their small home, she would hold him close and weave stories of better days, of hope, of eventual peace. The social fabric of the village became a quiet backdrop to their struggle. Neighbors offered what help they could, sometimes a handful of food, at other times a moment's labor or a kind word. The mother received these gifts gratefully, knowing they were threads stitching a fragile safety net under her precarious life. Yet even kindness had limits in a place where everyone fought their own battles against poverty. The landowner's daughter was a looming figure of authority and fear, her demands sharp and uncompromising. Every encounter with her was an ordeal. When she arrived to collect money, the mother's small earnings were handed over without protest. Each coin given was a sacrifice carved out of bare subsistence. The daughter's voice was cold and businesslike, devoid of empathy. She required full payment and made it clear that the slightest default would result in immediate eviction. The mother's heart shattered a little more with each visit, yet she never yielded to despair. Instead, she steeled herself anew, redoubling her efforts to gather enough money to survive. The atmosphere intensified in the days leading up to the deadline. Anxiety was a constant companion, gnawing at the edges of every thought and action. The mother's sleep was fractured and light. Dreams were filled with fears of losing everything, waking to the stark reality of their vulnerability. Her hands trembled at times, not from fatigue, but from the weight of uncertainty. Yet in these moments of weakness, she sought solace in memories and the enduring resilience that had carried her this far. The peanut fields, in their quiet stoicism, witnessed the ongoing toil and the emotional undercurrent that stirred beneath the surface. The soil was dry and cracked in patches, the hot wind scattering dust across the landscape. Yet the earth still held life, offering sustenance and a chance for survival. She felt a deep connection to this land, an unspoken dialogue between the roots beneath the soil and the hope swelling in her chest. Tony remained a source of motivation and fragility. His long hair, heavy with heat, symbolized both their poverty and the natural innocence that remained unspoiled. The neighbor's generous offer to cut his hair was a rare moment of grace, a proof that in the midst of hardship, kindness could ripple through the hardest days. It was a small act that brought comfort, a tangible reminder of community and care. The final approach of the landlord's daughter's return filled the mother's days with preparation. She arranged her work with meticulous care, ensuring that every effort was made to gather the remaining payment. She spoke often with the neighbor who had pledged assistance, seeking not just physical help, but the strength that came from shared struggle. Together, they planned for the unavoidable confrontation, strategizing on how to face the challenges ahead. As the day of reckoning arrived, the mother's breath caught in her throat. The sun climbed high and fierce as the landlord's daughter appeared, a figure sharp and unyielding against the dusty backdrop. Their eyes met briefly, a silent exchange charged with all the unsaid fears and hopes that had built over weeks. The mother offered what she had, small coins jangling as she handed them over, her expression steady despite the turmoil roiling inside. The daughter's verdict was firm. A deadline remained, but she granted a final chance, a narrow window in which to meet the demands or face eviction. The mother nodded, her heart a complex storm of relief and dread. She knew the battle was far from over, but this moment provided a sliver of breathing space, a chance to hold on. In the aftermath, the mother returned home with Tony, the weight of exhaustion pressing heavy on every limb. The two shared a quiet meal in the fading light, the world outside untouched by their private struggle. She felt the immense responsibility of protecting him, shielding him from despair, nurturing hope for days yet to come. Night settled softly, wrapping the small home in muted shadows. The mother sat silently, weaving her thoughts into prayers and plans. She reflected on the journey thus far, the relentless work, the harsh words, the small kindnesses. The land, the peanuts, the community, and their intertwined fates lay at the heart of her world. In this fragile balance, she found her strength. The battle ahead was daunting, but the love for her child and the fierce will to survive blazed brightly within her. Their story was one of endurance and hope, a testament to the power of human resilience against overwhelming odds. This chapter of their lives, though filled with hardship, was a narrative of courage, of a mother's unwavering fight to keep her family safe, and a child's unshaken innocence in a world demanding so much. As dawn approached again, the mother prepared herself once more. The future remained uncertain, but her heart held fast to the quiet certainty that no matter what came, she would face it with courage, love, and relentless determination, cherishing each moment with Tony and fighting for the life they deserved.